Alright, hello, welcome back to another episode of the Doug Las Vegas Bets UFC betting show. This week, back in Baku, Azerbaijan, headlined by Rafael Fiziev taking on Manuel Torres. Fun main event, plenty of fun fights on the card, a couple guys I really like. You guys know I'm a big Nazim Sadykhov fan, I've talked about that before, and I do quite like Fiziev as well. So without further ado, let's jump into these fights. Alright, good clash of strikers here in this main event, or strikers for the most part, I should say, as both have mixed in the ground game at times throughout their UFC career. But we got Rafael Fiziev taking on Manuel Torres in what is a just brilliant stylistic main event, and we'll get into that. Starting with Rafael Fiziev going over him, this guy is a Muay Thai practitioner for the most part, lightning fast kicks, athleticism. Has kind of struggled with injuries and consistency throughout his career. But when he's on, this guy is very fun to watch. One of those flow state guys. We've seen him do the lean back kick against Mark Jacasey. We saw a fantastic performance not that long ago, last time we were in Baku against Ignacio Bahamundes. So this guy is tremendous, and obviously he's just 1-4 in his last 5. But we got to look at the level of competition here. 2 losses to Justin Gaethje. The first one, I still score it for Rafael Fiziev. I don't think it's out of the question at all to give him the first 2 rounds in that fight. I think it was a very close fight. The rematch didn't make much sense, but he was coming off just an injury loss to Gamrot. I bet Gamrot in that spot, but I didn't, it wasn't one of those spots where, the injury TKO happens and you can say, oh, well, he looked good. It looked like he was on his way. I think that fight was still very up in the air. So, it's hard to hold that much against him. It's unfortunate injuries happen. The rematch with Justin Gaethje, he was on short notice. And again, we know how good Justin Gaethje is now. He's going to do that to a lot of guys. Still had success and won the first round. Then the great performance against Ignacio Bahamundes. And the only really concerning thing to me was his last fight. I thought he looked really bad against Mauricio Rufy, especially in that second round. Just the movement that we're used to seeing, the fluidity wasn't really there. It felt like he was content to just stand in front of him and keep trying to fire these naked low kicks without much of a setup. And it got him countered by a huge puncher in Rufy. And we've seen he has a good shin. He survived 2 wars with Justin Gaethje. But the guy can be taken out by knockout, and it happened again when a huge hitter in Rufy cracked him across the face. So, I definitely have questions about whether the injuries over time have limited his movement, and that's what resulted in the Rufy performance. Because he did look good against Bahamundes, so I tend to think he's not fully over the hill yet, but definitely he's not in his prime anymore, and I definitely have concerns that, he's looking at the cliff. One of these days we're going to see a bad slowdown. And when guys who are as explosive as him slow down, it's pretty quick. I compare it to these, point guards in the NBA, like Derrick Rose, where they rely on the huge athleticism so much to do the driving dunks. And then once that athleticism's gone, you often either see them fade out or switch their game around to a different kind of player. So, Rafael Fiziev might have to switch his game around to be a different kind of player if those fast kicks and the movement isn't what it once was. Manuel Torres on the other side, this guy comes in having won 4 of his last 5. El Loco, a great nickname. The guy is a madman. Comes in, he's very big. He's listed at 5'9". In some places, he's definitely bigger than 5'9". Very big, lightweight, long reach, and extremely dangerous. We've seen him knock out Nick Mota, saw him get the submission over Chris Duncan, a solid win. The Bahamundes performance was terrible, and I'll go back to that in a second. But then he touched Drew Dober, who's historically had a pretty good chin, and put him out. And then most recently took out Grant Dawson, who, maybe not the most impressive thing to knock him out, as that's your path to victory, but he got the job done. I did want to go back to that Ignacio fight, though, because I think that showed a real flaw. When you look at the other names on this list, no disrespect to anyone, they're all good fighters, good wins. But they're not the most technical strikers. Drew Dober is a very powerful striker, a very hard hitter with good technique, but, he gets into these brawls. Grant Dawson, not at all a technical striker. Chris Duncan, we've seen cracked. Nicholas Mota, also a brawler, we've seen cracked. The one time we saw him fight a guy who really put thought into his strikes and was a technical striker, it was Bahamundes, and it was bad. That fight was real bad. Torres was just blind driving in, and Bahamundes was a step ahead, like picking him apart over and over, cracking him with huge shots because he was just putting more thought into his strikes. And that's what my pick in this one's going to come down to. I'm going to pick Fiziev because although I do think Manuel Torres' physical advantages, it's a strong possibility that he cracks him early, which is why it's not super confident. I don't think I'm going to have a bet on this one unless the line keeps going. Torres has flipped to a favorite as of right now when I'm recording this on Bet Online at just minus 115, but that's a favorite with minus 105 on the other side. There is a favorite and an underdog. So I'll see if that line gets better because I do, after the Roofy performance, if he's just going to stand in front of another huge hitter like that, that gives Torres a clear path to victory. That being said, with how technical Fiziev is historically a very technical striker, we've seen him put a lot of thought into his game plans. I think if he just takes the time early to make the reads, he can start getting off the counters, start mounting the damage. Obviously, a lot more late fight experience. I'm not overly concerned about Torres' cardio, although his one decision win was a split. He trains at altitude, and I'm sure he was ready for 5 rounds here, but his path to victory is still early. We have to acknowledge the difference in late fight experience here. We've seen Fiziev get a knockout in the 5th round. We've never seen Torres go into 2nd round in the UFC or 3rd. Sorry. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I'm going to pick Fiziev here. I'm going to pick him to get a 3rd or 4th round TKO. I think he's just going to mount up the damage at home. I think he's going to be very motivated. I think he's a much more technical guy. Not an overly confident pick. But yeah, I do think Fiziev is the side here. No bet as of right now, but if that line moves into Fiziev and some comfortable plus money, I might put a unit on him. Next up here in the co-main, Sharabutdin Magomedov is back here against the ever-showman Michel Pereira. Or maybe not so much lately, actually, but we'll get into that. I'll start with Sharabutdin, the lightning-fast kickboxer, famous for very flashy kicks. Not elite boxing, not elite defense, and his ground game's definitely questionable. But those kicks and some good stylistic matchups has carried him to a good record in the UFC, 4-1 in his last 5. A couple finishes, definitely not the most dangerous finisher. He got that weird, double back fist against Armen Petrosian and beat Antonio Truccoli just on attrition, but definitely not the most dangerous guy. Marc-Andre Barrios went to decision with him, as well as Michał Oleksiejczuk. Solid. I hesitate to say it. Solid cardio. He has gone the distance a lot. Definitely not as strong in the 3rd round. The speed of those kicks slows down. Marc-Andre Barrios was able to kind of force a grittier fight out of him, have some success more in the middle stages of the fight, but he responded well late in that last fight. Overall, I think you can tell I'm not too high on the guy, but I think he's a fine fighter at the range that he's been fighting in. I don't think you can push him into the rankings. I think guys in the rankings would eat him. I think there's a lot of guys that are just too tough stylistically, guys that are going to actively grapple against him are going to beat him up, and we saw that with Michael Page, other strikers can outstrike him. He hasn't looked perfect against other strikers. That being said, with Michel Pereira, this guy can grapple. He's a well-rounded finisher, you could say. He got big power. He's hurt guys like Michał Oleksiejczuk to the body, Igor Potieria, and then grab chokes. But he is definitely mainly a striker with big explosive striking, strong boxing. But I'm definitely concerned that how some fights have played out have affected him, because he has looked scared of gassing out recently. I mean, you look at the Anthony Hernandez fight, it was really bad. He gassed out and then he got put through hell by Hernandez for several rounds. Just one of the worst beatdowns you could imagine once Hernandez took over. And then after that against Magomedov, he looked scared to let his hands go. Full blown. He lost that fight because he was scared to let his hands go. It went to decision. He didn't get finished because he gassed out and Abus took over late. Abus doesn't have great cardio either. It was just because he wouldn't throw. Obviously, the Dawkins fight, he got caught early. Questions about his durability coming up now with, how long he's been around, the losses, the damage he's taken. And then even against Zach Reese in his last fight, I had him. He was a leg in a parlay that cashed on that card, but I thought he lost the fight. The last 2 rounds just didn't look good. It was close. There was some good optics. I think you can make an argument. Like, I don't think Reese can really go home blaming anybody but himself that he lost that fight. There was no effort to separate. There wasn't separation. But if you ask me to score the fight, I'm going to score it for Reese. I'll say that. So I definitely just think the guy is scared of gassing out now. And when I look at his path to victory here, I don't think he can strike with Magomedov. I think the volume, the range, the kicks are just going to be too good on the side of Magomedov. So I think he has to grapple. And when he's grappling, I think he has to get a submission early or he's going to gas himself out. And when you look at Magomedov, not a great grappler, but he's been doing these submission matches with guys like Arman Tsarukyan outside the UFC. The guy's obviously worked on his jiu-jitsu a little bit. He's not going to be easy to submit. So I think as long as Magomedov has good enough grappling to survive like an early guillotine or something, then the grappling is not too much of a concern to me. So I do understand this price. I think I have a hard time seeing Pereira win, considering his win condition is almost always early stoppage at this point. He did get a decision his last time, but when you're fighting fighters better than Zach Reese, who, with respect, I don't think is very high level. Uh, I don't think he's a guy who can win enough minutes to comfortably get decisions. A knockout early, I find unlikely. Sharabutdin's pretty durable. He's got a pretty good chin. So I think the early submission is really Pereira's only path. And I find it pretty unlikely considering Magomedov's clearly been working on specifically his jiu-jitsu, not just his wrestling, the jiu-jitsu portion specifically to make sure he doesn't get submitted. So yeah, I kind of think Michel Pereira is going to keep it as a strike match. That's more of just a guess, and I think he's going to get just out-volumed and picked apart by Sharabutdin. So I'm going to take Magomedov by decision here. I don't think he puts too much pressure on, and Pereira will again be scared to gas out and just take the damage and get out-volumed to a decision here. So give me Magomedov by decision in this one. Next up, we got one of my boys who I've loved backing through his entire UFC career to this point, Nazim Sadykhov. Well, actually, I didn't back him in his last fight. That I should add an important note. I did not back him against Fiziev, but up to that point, I had taken him in every one of his fights. He was one of the first underdog best bet of the weeks I ever did against Ismail Bonfim. I believe that was the second underdog best bet ever, and it cashed. So I was very, very happy with that. I like watching Sadykhov fight. He's a tough, durable finisher. Just a gritty style, well-rounded. He's got good jiu-jitsu, tough to submit, and creates damage. I like these fighters that create damage. They absorb damage. I've always kind of compared him to Chito Vera, not a great minute winner, but super durable and has that ability to find a finish. If you look at the fight with Vyacheslav Borshev, you kind of get exactly what I mean there. He lost all the minutes in that fight, but it was a draw because he had that huge moment. Vyacheslav was able to survive, though the 10-8 round was enough to make it a draw. And outside of that, he's pretty much been losing all the minutes in his fights, but then found the finish. Going back to the debut against Evan Elder, gets the doctor stoppage down on the scorecards, submits Terrence McKinney after losing the first round. The Vyacheslav fight, the Bonfim fight, he was losing until the kick that created the doctor stoppage. It probably did win him the round, but essentially just lost the minutes until he found the finish in that one. Mota almost got finished early, lost the minutes in that one, survived and found the finish. And Fiziev, that performance was obviously very bad. Just found absolutely no success in that fight and eventually got hit with a huge elbow that was able to get him out of there at the end of the second round. I mean, that's the danger in being a guy that doesn't win the minutes. Eventually, there's going to be a tide that you can't slow down and turn, and that's what Ziam was that night. Now, Matheus Camilo, he's a younger guy who's come in here. This will be his third UFC fight. He's coming off his first win, a decision against Vyacheslav Borshev, where he was able to control him a lot on the ground. Looked kind of good early in that Gabe Green win too, but just too much too soon, right? He emptied his tank, gassed out, and as soon as Gabe Green turned the tide, he submitted him. So yeah, overall, I think this guy, he's super young, so I think he's still improving. I think he's going to get those minutes in the octagon, and he's pretty well-rounded, not a terrible striker, not elite, but pretty good control on the ground. Obviously, the questionable gas tank with the debut and with him being so young, you don't know how he's going to handle any situation. But I do think he's a relatively skilled fighter. As far as I think this one's going to play out, I'm picking Sadykhov inside the distance as my pure pick. I think he can find, I'll say a submission over a knockout, but I really think, it's just a matter of where the opportunity comes. But when it comes to betting, I think there's two angles you can take. Sadykhov inside the distance at plus 120 is interesting to me because I think when you make him as big a favorite as over minus 200, his clear path is inside the distance. He is not a guy who looks for decisions. He's not going to consistently win a decision. So the vast majority of the time that he wins at minus 240 is inside the distance. So you're giving me plus money on that. I don't think that's a bad play. If you want something a little juicier, though, I do think Camilo improving and with Sadykhov struggling to win the minutes, Camilo by decision at plus 550, I don't think is a bad play at all. I think that's his path because even though we've seen Sadykhov hurt badly in his last two fights, getting finished in his last one, historically he's still very durable. He's had a very good ability to take damage. He doesn't get cut. He takes big shots well. Very difficult to submit on the ground. Survived with Terrence McKinney on top of him and before he turned the table in that one. So I still believe in Sadykhov's durability to a pretty big degree. So from a betting perspective, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do because obviously, like I said, my pure pick is Sadykhov inside the distance, and they're giving me plus money on that. I might even end up with some on both here, although I typically don't like taking both sides of a fight. Hello, Lenny. Say hi. Say hi, buddy. My little puppy Lenny here came to say hi. But yeah, overall, my pick is going to be Sadykhov inside the distance. I'm not sure what angle I'm going to take yet, but I do think that both Sadykhov inside the distance at the short plus money it is. I have plus 120 written down. I'm not sure if it's changed on anything. Or Camilo by decision around plus 550, the plus 500 to 600 range. I think both of those could end up being solid plays, and that covers the path to victory for both fighters there. Here at flyweight, we got a good one with Almabayev taking on Charles Johnson. Start with Almabayev. He is a really good grappler who is 6-1 in the UFC. Some really good wins in there. In particular, a couple of his last few. The win over Jose Ochoa I thought was really impressive. I'm pretty high on Ochoa. He's a big flyweight. He hits hard, good striker, athletic, difficult to control because of his size and his length. And Asu did really well to control him for 3 rounds. I thought it was a fantastic performance. Against Alex Perez, struggled at times, but was able to find the finish there. Early in the third round, hurt him with the big spinning heel kick, and then when he shot in, grabbed the neck. Overall, I think his wrestling is going to be a big problem for a lot of guys in the division. The only person he's had trouble having grappling success against is Perez, who's a very strong defensive grappler. We saw him give Yakhyaev trouble as well. And Manel Kape, who's one of the best in the division. Just saw him beat Kyoji Horiguchi last week, catching us the prop play of the week. I'm still pretty high on him. 6 wins in the UFC with just the 1 loss being to Manel Kape, who's going to be a title challenger in his next fight. So potentially his only loss will be to a champion very soon if he wins this fight, of course. Now, with Charles Johnson, he has wins over the current champion in Josh Van. And maybe another future champion in Lonnie Kavanaugh. Some impressive wins on the resume of Charles Johnson, and that's why a lot of people like him. This guy is a historically durable, high-paced striker who turns it up really well in round 3, does well to survive early onslaughts. And that's kind of been the story of his career. If you gas out against Charles Johnson, you're going to lose. If you can put it on him for all 3 rounds, you're going to win. We've seen, well, even if you gas out, you might get the win. Ramazan Tamirov gassed out, Rafael Estevam gassed out and lost the 3rd round. They still got the decision wins because they did enough good work in the early rounds. And that durability that I have mentioned a few times is fading as we saw him take the first knockout loss of his career earlier this year to Alex Perez. So there's definitely some questions on the Charles Johnson side. I've already posted my bet for this fight. I've already posted it's the prop play of the week before recording this. I've got Asu Almabayev by decision in this one at plus 130. When you look at Charles Johnson, I think there's a couple fights that tell me exactly how this one is quite likely to go. And that's the Durden and Mokaev fight for the most part. Also the Estevam fight, but Estevam, a known gasser, which is a bad recipe for Charles Johnson. So I think that third round is a bit less likely to happen to Almabayev. I mean, if you look at the Durden fight, Durden, a guy with a good gas tank and good wrestling, dominated Charles Johnson. Mokaev, good gas tank, good wrestling, dominated Charles Johnson. So Almabayev doesn't have a great gas tank. You know, he's not Marab, I always compare people to. But he's got a good gas tank. We've seen him wrestle hard for 3 rounds. Decision wins over guys like Matheus Nicolau, Jose Ochoa. Got the 3rd round victory against Alex Perez last time out. The guy's got a good gas tank. He's definitely not a gasser. So I tend to believe that Asu can control his way to winning at least 2 out of 3 rounds and avoid the Charles Johnson knockout late. So yeah, I took him by decision at plus 130 here. I think it's good at any plus money. I just tend to think that's how the fight goes more often than not. Obviously, it's a fist fight. Anything can happen, but if you're giving me an outcome that I think is as high percentage as Asu by decision at plus money, I'm happy to take it. So short breakdown on that one, but yeah, I got Almabayev by decision here. Good matchup of finishers here at middleweight as Ikram Aliskerov takes on Brunno Ferreira. This is, yeah, like I said, a good match of finishers. I'll start with Aliskerov. He's 4-1 in his last 5. Only lost in the UFC the short notice main event against Robert Whittaker, where he was knocked out in round 1. Other than that, he's been, for the most part, knocking people out. Got the decision win last time over the Iron Turtle, Jun-Young Park. But yeah, he's looked good. He's a hard, powerful puncher. Did good, you know, to get that big highlight back in his debut against Phil Hawes, handled Warley Alves. Got the weird stoppage against Andrey Muniz. Showing a good ground game too. Obviously, being from Russia, where he's from, you probably grew up wrestling. You've probably been doing it your whole life. Kind of known for that regional loss to Hamzat, where he got took a nasty uppercut and went to sleep. So we have seen him knocked out twice with that and the Whittaker thing. So his chin's a little suspect. It's a little concern there, but definitely a very dangerous offensive fighter. On the other side, we got a dangerous offensive fighter with a suspect chin. Brunno Ferreira is coming for the most part, Finnish guys, has the 1 decision win against Marvin Vettori, the always durable, insane chin Marvin Vettori. But made a name for himself with that debut against Gregory Rodriguez. That just got avenged in his last fight. Rodriguez put him out with a right hand early. Kind of knew it was coming. We knew Ferreira had a suspect chin. He goes on these runs of finishing guys. He's got a decently dangerous ground game. Got the armbar against Jackson McVeigh, which was nice. And the triangle armbar against Armin Petrosian. So, you know, these guys, if you're not well versed on the ground, he can submit you. I don't think that's going to be a factor here against Ikram. I think Ikram is probably the better grappler, definitely the better wrestler, maybe not the better jiu-jitsu player, but definitely the better wrestler. I have a hard time seeing Ferreira get a submission game going here. So I tend to believe it's a striking match. Both guys with suspect chins. I lean slightly towards Ikram. I just think he's the more technical striker. Like I said, he has the wrestling advantage. I always tend to take guys with the wrestling advantage over guys with the jiu-jitsu advantage because I think they just usually have the ability to avoid the submission from the top. It's very hard in high-level MMA to submit someone out of your guard. Obviously, it happens, but I tend to think it's pretty low percentage. So yeah, I am going to pick Ikram here. I'm going to pick him by knockout. As far as betting, I think Ikram's betting him at that number against a dangerous finisher with his chin is a little questionable. Maybe using fight doesn't go the distance or fight ends by knockout as a parlay piece. I don't have those numbers right now. So I'll see. Overall, I'm not too excited to bet this one. I think the narrative around it is something I tend to agree with. They're both guys with suspect chins that hit pretty hard. I think it's hard to question that when you agree with the general public narrative. There's usually not a lot of betting value, but I'll check those numbers and see. Make sure you follow my socials to see if I post a play for this fight. It's Doug Las Vegas Bets on both Twitter and Instagram for anyone interested. Next, we got Abus Magomedov taking on Michał Oleksiejczuk. And an interesting one here at middleweight. We'll start with Abus. This is a pretty well-rounded guy. He got pushed to the top early with that fight against Sean Strickland in the main event in his second UFC fight when he clearly wasn't ready after having just ran through Dustin Stoltzfus in that first his UFC debut. Since then, I think he's done pretty well to grow as a fighter. You look at 3 of his last 4. He's got the win. Warley Alves, Michel, Pereira weren't the best performances. Getting the sub over Brunno Ferreira, pretty good look. And then losses to guys like Joe Pyfer and Kyle Bahayo. When you're losing to guys that are top 10 guys in the division, it's not that bad. The fact that you're competing with those guys even is pretty good. I mean, it wasn't particularly close fight in either case, but the experience against those guys can turn into a good thing no matter what the result in hindsight if you grow from it. So this is a guy who's been in the octagon with the champ, Sean Strickland, 2 other top 10 guys in Bahayo and Joe Pyfer, and I do think that's a good thing for him. Although I do think he's always going to have his limitations as a fighter. This is never a guy who's going to have a great gas tank. He's never going to look particularly strong in round 3. Although from a technical perspective, I think he's very skilled, very well-rounded. Obviously, a good kickboxer early. Obviously, very good technique and good power in his kicks and hands. And he's evolved mostly as a grappler. Now we've seen him mix in that ground game a lot more recently, getting the submission over Brunno Ferreira and using that wrestling to get wins over other guys. The Michel Pereira fight was weird. Pereira didn't really throw, so it was just kind of low volume. Abus took it by doing a bit more. I don't know. That one was a weird one to make much of, but still did more and took the win. I mean, he didn't take unnecessary chances. He just fought how he had to fight to win, fought within himself when it seemed like Michel Pereira's game plan might be to wait for him to gas out because he's gassed. He didn't gas himself out. So I thought that was good, not gassing himself. On the other side, another guy who's been good but had his clear flaws, a really hard hitter, obviously coming in here with 2 knockout wins in his last 3, has that big left hand that he swings over the top. Used to fight many weight classes above, finally got down, got the weight dialed in, and now he seemed to be getting better, having a team dialed in, working with the fighting nerds rather than out of his garage with his buddies. So he's evolved a little bit in that case. I think physically he's a good talent. That power is never going to go anywhere. That's just something he's natural born with. And the ground game's looked a little better, although I don't think this guy's ever going to be a particularly strong defensive grappler. We've seen him get submitted a couple times, even against Kevin Holland. He landed a big right hand early to drop and went into the guard and immediately got submitted. So I think the ground game is always going to be a concern with him, even if he's working with a better team now. It might be less of a hole than it was. I don't know that he's ever going to catch up to guys who have been strong grapplers for years, guys who have been doing this at that level since they were kids. So overall in this fight, I lean very slightly towards Magomedov because I tend to believe he'll be fine on the feet, especially in the early rounds. And I think he has a clear advantage on the ground. I do think Michał is the more dangerous guy, especially on the feet, and probably the more durable guy. But I think the submission for Abus is just as likely as the knockout for Michał. And I think if it goes to decision, it's going to be close. I think it'd be easy to see Abus controlling, especially the first round with his grappling. It's a bit more tougher to see him winning the third round, so it could be one that comes down to the second round. But I just tend to think Abus Magomedov has more ways to win. We've also seen Michał hurt to the body, so he's not invincible. It's not impossible for Abus to get his own knockout early. It comes down to me. For me, it comes down to Abus Magomedov having more ways to win this fight, but it's a good matchup. So give me Abus here. I'll pick him to get a second round submission. Here we got the UFC debut of Farman Hasanov as he takes on Eric Nolan, who's back after taking on Baisinger Suskaev in a short notice debut up a weight class. So this is his debut at 170, his true debut, if you will. But we'll start with Hasanov here. 5-0 as a pro with 4 finishes, so a nice undefeated record. Although I have some questions. I mean, he's looked fine in a lot of these fights, but it just feels like this isn't a guy who's UFC ready. You can pretty easily pick apart his resume opponent-wise. His last fight was against a guy who was 6-0, but it was against a lightweight. The guy had fought at lightweight for a long time and had been gone for a year and a bit. And it was a doctor stoppage where he was getting tagged up pretty good early, got cut above the eye early, struggled on the feet before he got on top, and did the damage for the doctor stoppage with his ground and pound. I will praise his ground and pound. It's by far the best part of his game, but he was a huge favorite in that one. The fight before that, he was a huge favorite as well against a guy who's now 3-4. He was 3-1 at the time. And in the first round, really struggled to get the takedown. Kind of showed what I'm going to get into as my issue with his striking. It's very one shot at a time. When he can't get the takedown, he swings for these big punches to try and just set up his takedowns. But he really struggled to get the takedown in that one and didn't get the stoppage until in the second round he finally got on top. And once he's on top, he's fantastic. He does great work to get in these dominant positions, worked his way to the back, and pounded out for a stoppage, put the guy in a really bad spot and started landing. So I do think when he gets to his positions, he's great. But I just don't know. I don't think he's great outside of those positions when he's in dominant ground and pound spots. He's pretty good at getting to those spots against lower level guys. What happens if, in this fight against Eric Nolan, it's a little tougher for him to get those spots. He takes a little more damage than he did against Vasilov, the lightweight, in his last fight before getting down, or he gets him down and then Nolan gets up. Because now I'll shift over to Eric Nolan. One thing I really liked about his debut is he did not just quit. He got taken down by Sadykhov, kept working his way up, and worked his way back into the fight at the end of a first round when it would have been easy for him to just go, okay, he got me down, I'll regroup in the second round. Worked his way back up and landed a big shot at the end of the first round that really rocked Sadykhov. And this guy throws good boxing combinations, throws his strikes well together. And he managed to do that on 4 days' notice against a much bigger opponent who was a minus 1,000 against him. I thought that was a really good performance, and he's done a lot of that in CFFC, one of the better regional promotions. His losses were to future UFC guys, or he's avenged them. Ty Miller had a split decision with him when they were both young. And Nolan's still young. He just transitioned to MMA in 2018, 2019. So he's still pretty new to this. He's still getting a lot better. I really like his hands. Maybe not the strongest grappler. We've seen him taken down, submitted. We saw him taken down and submitted in his UFC debut, of course. But I don't think he's a bad grappler at all. That was also against a much bigger guy in his UFC debut, and he avenged the earlier submission loss in his career with a first round knockout. So I think he's improving on the ground, always had good boxing, still getting better, still young. The debut showed a lot of promise, and he's got good experience, both regional. He's tested himself, which is something I like. So I am going to pick Eric Nolan here. He's going to be my underdog best bet of the week. I like him on the feet a lot more because he throws these combinations. I already said the one shot is a thing that I noticed on the side of Hasanov, Hasanov just throwing one shot at the time, and I like that Eric Nolan throws combinations. I think Hasanov could get on top, but if he doesn't get that dominant position and then Eric Nolan gets back up, it's just going to be more work for Eric Nolan on the feet. And if he can't get him down in the first place, which he struggled to get some of these lower level fighters down, so I don't think it's a sure thing at all that Hasanov has any wrestling success in this one. Then I think it's all Eric Nolan. So I think at plus 150, it's definitely worth a shot on Eric Nolan. I think the record is making people pick Hasanov, or making the odds makers lean that way. I just think from what we've seen in the cage, I have too many questions about how Hasanov is going to handle not being able to do what he's easily been able to do to these lower level guys. Here we got a showcase for a big-time prospect, Abdul-Rakhman Yakhyaev. This guy is a dominant finisher, 9 fights. I think 8 finishes. He has 1 fight that went 5-round to a 5-round decision. So the guy's no cardio slouch either. He wasn't pushing hard in round 5, but the guy's gone 5 rounds and he's just destroying people at this next level, knocking them out like he did on Contender Series, or getting submissions like he has in his first 2 UFC fights. And against a guy like Brenson Ribeiro, who had never been submitted before. The Cerqueira one, not very impressive, even though he knocked him out, then submitted him. So he did it with about as many style points as you can get against a guy like Cerqueira. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because they're slow balling this one. Julius Walker, he's a tough fighter, tough striker, uh, decent grappling on top, but I don't think he's that high level. We talked about how Yakhyaev beat Cerqueira with as many style points as possible. Walker beat him with as few style points as possible. Took him to decision when everyone else destroyed Cerqueira. And then outside of Cerqueira, he's 0-2 in the UFC with a split decision where he came in on short notice and just had a weird brawl with Alonzo Menafield. And then Dustin Jacoby weathered a couple early moments from him and was able to get him out of there by TKO in the second round of his last fight. So I just don't think Julius Walker is that great. Maybe more battle test. Well, yes, definitely more battle test having fought guys like Menafield and Jacoby, who Yakhyaev hasn't been tested against yet. But Yakhyaev just has been so physically impressive. He's so young. He's still getting better. He has the 5-round experience in his back pocket. I think there's too many reasons to like Yakhyaev here to go against him. The money line price feels a little oddly short. I was kind of expecting like a minus 900, but I guess it makes sense when you consider like I said, the experience edge. The fact that we've seen Julius Walker have success early against a guy like Jacoby, and there was a little bit of struggle early against Ribeiro for Yakhyaev. There's maybe that little bit of reasonable doubt to not make him the nuclear size favorite that I was just expecting. But yeah, I do expect Yakhyaev to get another finish in this one. I think it's probably going to be by knockout this time. I said that last time because Ribeiro had never been submitted. But yeah, I think Walker's pretty competent on the ground, and Yakhyaev is a dangerous striker. So when he lands one of these times, he's going to knock somebody out. But a submission wouldn't shock me at all. I do think he's also the superior grappler. So yeah, give me Abdul-Rakhman Yakhyaev to get it done inside the distance. Probably round 1, although I don't think there's going to be any betting value on that one. Here we got a middleweight bout between Nursulton Ruziboev and Andrey Pulyaev. Interesting matchup here. Ruziboev, quick finisher for the most part in his UFC career, is coming off that decision win against Dustin Stoltzfus, where survived early and then they were both kind of tired. Dustin Stoltzfus doesn't have a great gas tank either. But for the most part, his wins come early in the fight. Has that early knockout over Brunno Ferreira, who we talked about earlier. Knockout win over Eric McConaughey. I poked Cedrikas Dumas to a TKO win. So the guy hits pretty hard. He's got a pretty good submission game too. Shown that off more outside the UFC. Very tall, long guy. Don't know how he's fought at welterweight inside the UFC. I like him better at middleweight. I think that's better for his gas tank. Did survive 3 rounds with Joaquin Buckley, but definitely this is not a cardio guy. But pretty well-rounded offensively. Early hits pretty damn hard with that missile of a right hand. On the other side, Andrey Pulyaev, he's a slick kickboxer, pretty good body kicks, pretty durable guy. We've seen him go to decisions with Christian Leroy Duncan, Atabak Gauthier, weather an early storm against Nick Klein to come back for that knockout. Good movement on the outside, good body kicks, kind of limited on the output side sometimes when he's outmatched in power. And specifically, I want to talk about that Gauthier fight because I think a lot of people are giving him credit for surviving, thinking, oh, he's great defensively. He's got a granite chin. He survived against Gauthier. He got nuked pretty hard early in that one and got floored. And then he just stayed on the movement. And I think, if anything, that more displayed Gauthier's lack of experience in being unable to cut off the cage and find a finish, and his limited skill set, and that he couldn't mix in the grappling at all. And that's kind of what this one's going to come down to. I think a lot of people are viewing Ruziboev as a hard hitter who gasses out, unlike kind of like Gauthier, and we're going to see him gas out and Pulyaev take over late like he couldn't against Gauthier. I kind of view it differently than that. I think Ruziboev's just the more well-rounded offensive fighter who can hit hard early, probably a little more technical, will give Pulyaev a lot more trouble on the ground. I think he's infinitely more likely to find a submission mix in the ground game than Gauthier was. So again, this kind of like the Magomedov fight, but not really. I'm taking Ruziboev here because I think he has more ways to win. I think he can get an early knockout. We saw Pulyaev hurt early in that Gauthier fight, so not durable because of his movement partially, but also he can be clipped for sure. And then that ground game, I think Ruziboev has a massive advantage on the ground, which we haven't seen. Guys like CLD and Gauthier didn't, so they couldn't use that to get the finish. So I think a submission is very live here for Ruziboev as well. I'll take him to get some kind of finish here in the first 2 rounds. But not overly confident, because if it does get in the third round, Pulyaev could take over maybe late in the second round. If it is just a pure striking match, it could get close. But I definitely understand the price on Nursulton Ruziboev around -200. I think is a fair price tag on this one. So yeah, give me Ruziboev. My prediction will be him to get a finish in the first 2 rounds. Next, we got Kaan Ofli taking on Javier Reyes in this one. I'll start with Ofli here. Decently well-rounded guy, definitely more of a grappler, has way more success with his grappling. Got the submission in his only real UFC win. We'll get to that in a sec. Getting the first round submission over Ricardo Ramos. Other than that, lost the tough finale against Myron Santos, getting knocked out pretty brutally in that one. A bad performance, couldn't get his grappling going at all, just got stuffed and destroyed on the feet. Against Muhammad Naimov, got just outpointed for 3 rounds. Wasn't overly competitive of a fight. Wasn't completely outclassed. And then he has won his last 2 with the Roy Almost performance. And then against Yijia last time out, nearly got finished in round 2. And somehow, I thought he'd clearly got the decision. I think most people thought he had clearly got the decision. They gave him rounds 1 and 3 on a couple scorecards to give him pretty inexplicable decision and a pretty bad performance against Yijia. Overall, though, this guy is not the worst striker in the world, not helpless on the feet against most people, can get hurt as he was against Yijia and Myron Santos, of course. When his grappling doesn't get going, he definitely struggles. But, this is a decently well-rounded fighter who can take out lower-level guys. And if he does get control on the ground, he can do stuff with it early. Ricardo Ramos isn't a terrible grappler, and he was able to secure a first-round submission against him. So this guy is dangerous if you let him get grappling success early. But for the most part, his wrestling isn't great, so he doesn't get that control that he needs to have the success. Against Javier Reyes here, I am kind of concerned he does get that success early. Reyes is one of these guys that kind of builds in rounds 2 and 3, a pressure fighter that just kind of breaks guys down with his cardio, his pace, weathers the early storm quite often. Not necessarily the greatest grappler, coming off that end of the round stoppage in his UFC debut when, wasn't looking great. But again, that's his game, the pressure. He's not necessarily going to look great early, but in rounds 2 and 3, how are you going to deal with him? And I think that's what this fight comes down to. First of all, can Ofli get the grappling success early? I do think there's an outside chance he gets an early submission in this one, just gets on top and Reyes tries to explode out and can't survive, or gets caught in a rear naked choke like Ricardo Ramos. But for the most part, I see Javier Reyes weathering the storm of maybe some grappling success in round 1 or a close lower volume round 1. And then in rounds 2 and 3, he just starts moving forward. Ofli can't land the takedowns. He starts doing more damage and either finds a late finish or gets a decision. So I'll make that my prediction. Javier Reyes to survive the early grappling success and get going. No need to lock in an official, either the late stoppage in rounds 2 or 3 or a decision. For Javier Reyes here, that's my pick. Alright, last fight I'm going to go over here. Fun bantamweight matchup between Bekzak Kazakh Thunder, Almabayev, and Gian Matsumoto. Start talking about Almabayev here. This guy is a dynamite hard hitter. We saw that immediately in his short notice debut. Took on Umar Nurmagomedov and dropped him bad. And then obviously got controlled the rest of the fight, but that's what Umar Nurmagomedov has done to the majority of the bantamweights on the planet. That's a top 5 guy we're talking about. Dropping him at all coming in there was pretty impressive, and not getting submitted also was a pretty good look for his jiu-jitsu, in my opinion. Umar not necessarily the biggest submission threat, but again, this is a guy who's competing with top 5 guys now. He's not a submission threat against the best in the world, and not against Almabayev either. Then became the first guy to KO Brad Katona, smoked him early, just landed those power shots, showed that power that he dropped Umar with is real. That wasn't just a fluke shot. Being the first guy to knock out Brad Katona, who's been in some wars, was a pretty good feather in his cap, in my opinion. And then a tough fight against Alexander Topuria. We cashed on Topuria by decision in that one. I mean, Topuria is not his brother, but that's a tough fight skill-wise. Topuria's boxing is elite. He's going to be hard to match technique-wise. And in the grappling, he was able to mix that in on Almabayev. Almabayev just not the greatest defensive wrestler. So he lost the decision, although it wasn't the worst look overall. Almabayev was definitely competitive, especially early. So I think he's looked fine. He's just had pretty tough scheduling so far in his UFC career. I mean, even Brad Katona's not an easy fight. This has been 3 legit fights in his career. He's had to fight Umar, top 5 guy, an Ultimate Fighter winner in Brad Katona, and Alexander Topuria, who probably one of the best unranked guys in the entire division. So this guy's been done no favors on his way up here. On the other side, another guy who's had some real tough matchups lately is John Matsumoto. He's young. He got catapulted after a win over Brad Katona as well, where they went to war, fought Rob Font, and then had the close split decision. A lot of people thought it went the other way. I thought it was fine. It was a close fight. Rob Font really lit him up in the boxing, but he used his grappling to win a round, make it close. It was a good fight. I thought it was a good look for Matsumoto, taking that big step up in the division. And then his next fight against Miles Johns kind of showed that my thing with him is he looks good depending on stylistics. The guy's a natural brawler on the feet. So if you can't wrestle with him, you're probably, or if he can't wrestle you comfortably, you're going to have a brawl with him, even if you're not the most technical striker. A guy like Brad Katona was landing huge shots on the feet because neither of them could establish a lot of grappling success. The same thing happened with Miles Johns. It went to split decision. It was a really close fight. And a guy with Miles Johns who, if you're right up there with Rob Font, you should theoretically beat Miles Johns pretty comfortably. But he didn't. I think there's an argument that Johns won that fight as much as there is that Font won, that Matsumoto won the other one, or the Basharat fight. So, the guy, him being a clear favorite, in my opinion, always comes down to how much grappling success can he have. If he's the much better grappler, then yeah, he's probably going to use that, mix that in, and keep it close on the feet, like he did against Rob Font, unless you're an elite striker. But if you're outmatched, or if he outmatches, but if you can match him on the ground, you're probably going to give him some trouble. You're probably going to make it a very close fight. As has been the case in his last 4. I mean, the Katona fight was a rather close decision. The Font fight was a close decision. The Johns fight was a close decision, and people debate the Basharat one too. So what this fight comes down to really is, can Matsumoto have some comfortable wrestling success? I tend to believe he can, so I understand why he's favored here. If I'm making a pure pick, I'm going to say Matsu by decision, so I understand why that's the short prop at short plus money, plus 120. I don't think it's a terrible play here. I also think Beksat by knockout is possible, though, especially in the early round. I think if Matsu tries to stand there with him early and can't get him down when he's most dangerous, Beksat lands a few. We've seen Matsu cracked. Matsu's striking defense isn't the best, no matter who he's fighting. He's going to get hit hard. And we know that Almabayev has real fight-changing power. So we haven't seen Matsumoto KO'd, but against a guy like Almabayev, I don't want to really depend on that chin to eat some huge shots and have him mix in wrestling success. So I'm very hesitant where to go with this one. I've considered both Beksat by KO or Matsu by decision at plus 120. I think it's, a matchup that can go one of those two ways, kind of similar to Sadykhov versus Camilo early. I'll think about this one some more. I don't know if I'm going to have an official play on it, but yeah, if you're looking for something, I don't think you can really go that wrong with Beksat by KO or Matsu by decision. That's my thoughts. My official pick here will be Matsumoto to take a decision. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Another early start time this weekend, and we got the week off next week, so I'm not going to see you next week. The 2 bets that I have locked in right now is the prop play of the week, Asu Almabayev by decision at plus 230 or 130, excuse me. Whoa. I have 2 units on that, and I have 2 units on Eric Nolan at plus 150 as the underdog best bet of the week. Not sure if I'm going to lock in a parlay for this week. I'm considering probably only going to do that if I like the spots going forward. But make sure to follow me on socials so you see. It's at Doug Las Vegas Bets on both Twitter and Instagram. Leave a like, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment. That stuff all really helps me out, helps the video get more views, and I'm trying to grow this, so please, it's all greatly appreciated. I really hope you enjoyed my picks. I hope this helps you out, and I hope you enjoy the fights this weekend.